As someone into video games, sometimes you find something you still can't believe even after seeing it 100 times. For example, how in the world are we getting a brand new Mario and Luigi game after all this time, much less one that looks and animates this good? It's actually crazy how far Mario has come since the early 2010s. Remember when so many of his games looked almost the exact same? Now it's like the opposite, like Nintendo is actively trying to make each feel different and unique and weird, just like his earliest games were famous for. But I think there's a reason why that quirkiness has come back, and why it fell by the wayside for a while. There's a story here, one of success, failure, experimentation, and finding oneself in video game form. A story I think is worth reading between the lines in order to tell. So, settle in, grab some popcorn if you're so inclined, and let me spin a tale of how Mario forgot, then rediscovered how to be weird. Real quick, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and join the over 30,000 that have already, if this video wins you over, that is. Mario's earliest games need no introduction. They're iconic, groundbreaking for their time, beacons of thoughtful game design to the point that countless articles and videos have dissected them. They're also really freaking weird. We're all accustomed to the Mushroom Kingdom by now, but imagine hearing back then this whole premise of an Italian-American plumber running around a fantasy world half inspired by Alice in Wonderland, fighting a giant dragon turtle and his minions by using mushrooms that make him bigger, flowers that let him throw fireballs, and magic leaves that form flying tanuki costumes around his body. Even by 80s standards, that stood out. But it wasn't just the offbeat premise or the very fun gameplay that made Mario stand out, it was how new and different each mainline game, lost levels aside, was free to be. It says something that Nintendo of America had no problem reskinning an unrelated game to market as Super Mario Bros. 2 in the US, or that the higher-ups in Japan were won over enough that they released it over there too, and adopted a bunch of enemies and details from it into official canon, like Peach being able to float in mid-air, or Toads as a whole being stronger than they look. Video games were still young back then, and when it came to following up a surprise hit, it was like the Wild West, which was part of the charm, which helps explain how wide a net Nintendo cast with Mario spin-offs back then. A kart racer prototype? Let's add Mario characters. A light gun game using the Super Scope? Worth a shot. Roping Squaresoft into a role-playing spin-off featuring a bevy of original characters? Let's do it! Poorly conceived edutainment games? Look, not all of them were winners, but Nintendo's desire to innovate and experiment stuck with Mario all the way through his big jump to 3D. Super Mario 64 didn't just anchor a very sparse N64 launch lineup, and didn't just codify how to truly adapt platformer game design into 3 dimensions, it did so while completely breaking the conventions established by 2D Mario to form a brand new subgenre. Sure, it was necessary because of hardware limitations, but not many developers would have answered that challenge by creating the collectathon platformer. Even Mario's secondary cast started getting their own games with their own versions of the world and gameplay. Donkey Kong, Wario, and Yoshi got their own platformers with distinct styles and mechanics, and Luigi eventually introduced a more playful take on the then-growing genre of survival horror. To a fan at the time, it was like Nintendo never ran out of cool ideas, always finding ways to take what you already knew and put a unique spin on it. But underneath that creativity, there was a problem. The NES might have vaulted Nintendo into the spotlight, but each home console that came after kept losing ground and selling less despite those innovations. There are several reasons why. Nintendo's overprotective streak was even stronger back then, and they had a bad habit of alienating developers because of it, in one case, creating their own biggest rival. Questionable creative decisions, like sticking to cartridges for the N64 despite them being far weaker than disk storage at the time, made their consoles harder to develop for, causing even more dev teams to bail on them as their shrinking audience stopped being worth the hassle. And honestly, a big part was Nintendo's competition successfully framing their products as for little kids, not real gamers, at a time where enough people playing video games were older kids and teenagers receptive to that idea. And after the GameCube sold far worse than they'd hoped, Nintendo was forced to reevaluate themselves and figure out a way to reverse their fortunes. Which I get. While I've never worked on video games professionally, I've been on YouTube long enough to go through slumps like that. that. When stuff that used to work suddenly doesn't, it can make you flail around, hoping to find something that'll win back the crowd so you can regain your footing. Sometimes doing something weird and different works, but other times it doesn't. Nintendo did eventually strike gold again, with something revolutionary for its time that, in an ironic twist, pulled Mario into a sharp left turn towards stagnation. While Sony and Microsoft fought over graphical fidelity and processing power, Nintendo realized competing with them directly hadn't worked out, so they chose to do their own thing. Using advanced motion controls instead of HD visuals, they hoped to appeal to a whole demographic of people who weren't normally into video games, which was a huge risk at the time. HD was the big new thing in gaming, and Nintendo saw a lot of backlash for opting out of it for their new console, rivaled only by the backlash the console's name got. Calling it the Wii did not help the Nintendo is only for little kids allegations. And yet, as you know, it worked. The Wii became a smash hit despite all odds, successfully drawing in a whole new wave of casual gamers who wanted to see what the fuss was about. But getting the attention of this new audience wouldn't be enough. Nintendo needed a hook to get these new casual gamers to stick around, including the parents and older buyers who grew up with the NES. I believe this caused a gradual shift for Nintendo's flagship franchise, hoping to appeal to that nostalgia, but instead of tapping into the weirdness of classic Mario, they chose instead to play it safe, focusing on the series' most recognizable aspects and standardizing them more and more over time. For example, Super Mario Galaxy was an instant hit, and the devs had so many ideas left over that they decided to make an entire sequel. But the design philosophy behind Super Mario Galaxy 2, which seems to have kicked in after the aforementioned shift, was pretty different, with a simpler plot that shared no continuity with the first game, hardly any lore or world building, and more linear gameplay with greater emphasis on 2D segments. Don't get me wrong, Galaxy 2 is still a great game, but it didn't leave as strong an impression as Galaxy 1, and I think all of that streamlining is why. While Galaxy 1 felt like a gourmet meal at a 5-star restaurant, Galaxy 2 was more like a bar and grill franchise attempting the same dish. Still nice, and the portions were actually a little bigger, but it just lacked the right stuff to elevate it. And this creative shift kept affecting 3D Mario. The next fully new one was a portable 3DS detour that played like 2D Mario, linear, non-connected levels where the goal is always to reach the flagpole at the end. And the game after that? More of the same, just back on a home console. Again, don't get me wrong, neither of these games were bad, especially not 3D World. But can you see how mainline Mario started to feel more watered down as this era went on? I remember people being lukewarm about 3D World after its first couple trailers, because it just felt like more of the same with a few new ideas. Wasn't until the later trailers that interest picked up, the ones that showed off a ton of new enemies, power-ups, and design gimmicks, confirming that it was at least trying to innovate on the gameplay front, even if the design was derivative. But other Mario games weren't so lucky. When New Super Mario Bros. First launched on the DS, it was a breath of fresh air, the first completely new 2D Mario platformer in over 15 years. Then we got a follow-up on the Wii. Sure, it recycled the same world and level themes and several music tracks, but it had fancier visuals, more screen space, and 4-player co-op. And the Koopalings were back after being mostly MIA since Super Mario World. Then a couple years later, we got another one, with the same bare-bones plot, same world and level themes, and same boss lineup with Bowser and the Koopalings again. The only thing new was an emphasis on gold and coin collecting, which mostly just made an already easy game even easier. And then we got another one. Same world and level themes, but in HD now and with slightly different visuals, only slightly different plot. Now Bowser took over Peach's castle instead of taking the princess back to his. Mostly the same lineup of bosses again, and it came out less than 4 months after the previous one. At this point, mainline Mario games were feeling like fast food, something to default to when you don't feel like splurging on something more extravagant, not something you actively look forward to experiencing, and definitely not a good choice for a console's biggest first-party launch title. This growing sterility also bled into the spin-offs. This is where Paper Mario famously tried to reinvent the wheel with a flawed gimmick marred by baffling gameplay decisions and a bland set of levels that mostly used the exact same biomes as every other Mario game at the time, and it wasn't going to be this way originally. Screenshots of early builds show something much more unique, yet they threw that out for something paint by numbers. Is it any surprise Sticker Star poisoned Paper Mario's reputation so badly that the two games after it hardly stood a chance? Check this video out if you want to hear more. While Mario's other active RPG series had the opposite problem. Mario and Luigi kept the unique visuals for a while longer, but played things increasingly safe gameplay-wise, netting diminishing returns of fan interest anyway. Case in point, Paper Jam could have been an off-the-wall crossover that celebrated both series, yet it somehow took the worst aspects festering in both at the time to make something genuinely bland, forgettable, and unappealing to buyers. And Nintendo's solution to turn things around was to play it even safer with a remake that homogenized the original's art style and wound up more of a side grade gameplay-wise, followed by another remake, this time of a game the 3DS could already play, which, in a tragic twist, sold so poorly that its entire studio shut down because Nintendo's higher-ups were so focused on appealing to the familiar above all else. Not even Mario Party was safe from this. While taking a break after almost yearly releases for 8 games wasn't a bad idea, Mario Party 9 pulled a Sticker Star and tried too hard to reinvent the wheel with a new gameplay gimmick that wasn't as engaging as what it replaced, backed by mostly the exact same visuals and art style that were quickly wearing out their welcome. And the sequel didn't learn from its predecessor's mistakes. While it threw in a new asymmetrical multiplayer mode, the game had the same flaws as before with less content to play. Admittedly, I'm oversimplifying things. There were some Mario titles that still tried to be different and stuck the landing. Mario Kart 8 rejected the other game's homogenous aesthetics for a unique, highly detailed art style with plenty of unique locations and even some actual continuity. Super Mario Maker handed the tools for 2D Mario over to the fans, letting them use ideas both familiar and new to build their own levels for others to play, with the results exactly as creative, chaotic, and occasionally disturbing as you'd expect. But as the 2010s went on, it was clear that Nintendo's attempt to keep Mario safe and comfortable wasn't working, and wasn't going to prop up their downturn of fortune. Most of the casual fans they gained with the Wii hadn't stuck around. Instead of staying for the 3DS and Wii U, they moved on to the next fad, the fledgling market of mobile games, which left them with an increasingly dissatisfied base and a bunch of Mario games that all blurred together in ways that weren't convincing much of anyone to get on board the sinking ship. It was a rough time. To regain their lost momentum, Nintendo and Mario would have to recapture the magic that made them a household name 30 years prior. And one day in late 2016, everything suddenly clicked. Before we knew it, the Nintendo Switch had arrived, and it was coming out swinging. Splitting off further from the rest of the console wars, Nintendo had something new, original, and innovative on their hands, and the simple premise of a hybrid console you can connect to your TV or pick up and play anywhere appealed to many gamers who hadn't cared about the Wii U. And as Nintendo found its offbeat ingenuity again, Mario himself followed suit. While 3D Mario had never fully succumbed to this safe era, Odyssey marked a turning point where the series was deliberately as unique and weird as it could get once more. Sure, it might have had the usual world themes, a desert, a forest, a beach, a volcano, etc., but each offered such original takes on the classic tropes, like setting the forest in an artificial habitat with rusted out structures and walkways everywhere, or making the volcano a technicolor realm where the lava is bright pink and the rocks are shaped like food. And the gameplay itself leaned into it. The capture mechanic meant enemies could double as temporary power-ups, something the level design took full advantage of. And by giving Mario even more moves than he'd ever had before, while keeping them intuitive, easy to learn, and mostly optional, players were encouraged to find their own personal ways to get from A to B. But it wasn't just mainline Mario getting experimental again. We take it for granted nowadays, but when rumors of a crossover between Mario and the Rabbids first spread, no one had any confidence it'd be any good. And yet, it was, while tapping into an entire genre Mario had never stepped foot in before. A combination of quirky and quality that gave the Switch even more early momentum. And a year later, wouldn't you know it, Mario Party was back, and trying to merely refine the wheel instead of completely reinventing it, or at least not trapping everyone in a single vehicle with hardly any self-agency. While the first attempt was kinda rough around the edges, it still won back the crowd, and we eventually got a follow-up that paid tribute to the series' roots, and another new game coming soon that's trying to build on the classic formula without scrapping it completely. Reviews pending. Hopefully it's good. And 2D Mario eventually got in on the action. After the new series succumbed to its own staleness, we finally got a legitimately new title that intentionally embraced the weirdness the early Mario games were so famous for. The lack of hard deadline also helped, which means Nintendo's higher-ups themselves had realized how much it helped to let the devs cook. Even the secondary cast is more active again after hit-and-miss showings on the Wii U. A third Luigi's Mansion took the best parts of the first two and combined them with some of the best visuals on the entire console. Princess Peach just got a game of her own for the second time ever, and this second act has met with open arms and cheering theater guests. The Switch era hasn't been completely perfect for Mario. Not every attempt has been a hit. The sports games have mostly faltered. Mario Tennis delving into fighting game style meter management worked well enough, but Mario Golf's course design was dragged down by needing to build everything around its speed golf mode, and Striker's surprising lack of content did not go over well. About as well as Nintendo's attempts to celebrate Mario's 35th anniversary. 3D All-Stars came off half-baked compared to other compilations, and while Mario 35 was fun, it was pulled off the Switch Online service quickly. And while some spin-offs have come back, others have been stuck waiting. DK's been a no-show other than ports and remakes of older games, and after Yoshi stumbled a bit with Crafted World, he's also been inactive aside from being Wonder's easy mode via overpowered character. But the craziest plot twist of the Switch era? Somehow, all three of Mario's role-playing series are active again. Seriously, I don't know which is more insane. The Thousand Year Door getting a full remake, the original Super Mario RPG getting its own remake with Square Enix on board, or Mario and Luigi rising from its grave with a brand new entry despite Alpha Dream's old staff being scattered across multiple studios nowadays. And each has been so carefully crafted, so attentive to detail that it shows the teams behind them genuinely get why these games had such a reputation in their heyday. Super Mario RPG's original charm is all there, just with a modern coat of paint and quality of life updates. Paper Mario has nearly perfected its arts and crafts aesthetic, looking and animating better than ever. And whoever is behind Brothership has somehow replicated the Mario and Luigi art style in full 3D, masterfully blending cartoony, over-the-top animations with gameplay that, so far, looks as promising as the series' highest points. Mario has finally found his stride again, embracing the weirdness that made the Plumbers so famous almost 40 years ago and combining it once more with well-thought-out game design. And because of it, many of his games have never been in better shape. We've come a long way. It's been a long and winding road to reach Mario's current high point. From humble beginnings with creativity to spare yet declining sales, to playing it safe in hopes of catering to a lucrative new audience, which only worked temporarily, to the current era where Mario is pulling off the best of both worlds, his games regaining their confidence and subversive nature all at once. Ironically, looking back like this just makes me want to look forward now. With Nintendo's next console on the horizon, a new 3D Mario game is only a matter of time. So what might that be like? And the first new console Mario Kart in over a decade can't be far behind. Actually made another video recently talking about that topic. Or with all of Mario's RPG series active again, could the next Paper Mario find ways to stand out while keeping its core gameplay intact? Could we see a direct Super Mario RPG sequel developed by the team behind the remake? And with the movie's overwhelming commercial success, what'll its recently announced sequel be like? And what other ideas could show up out of left field and be the next Mario plus Rabbids? Hard to say for a while yet, but we can count on two things. Whatever they're working on, it'll be really fun, and it'll probably be really weird, in a good way. Special thanks to the following for contributing to this video. Thanks especially to my patrons for the continued support through all of my channel's own ups and downs. And hey, I have other videos about other topics that you might want to check out. A lot of analytical and theory craft stuff to watch here, including a series where I craft full fighter designs for characters who haven't made it into Smash Bros. Yet, and another where I remake the designs of veterans who could use an update. So, until next time, thank you, but our princess is in another... Wait, who wrote this?